Welcome to Africa and Beyond Television Network. And this afternoon or this evening, let us take a look on this question. Did President Nelson Chamisa lose the election on his own or on his own accord? Can we blame him? So let me start by answering this question from Bruce McLaren. He asks the reason why I used the word costed in the headline. I can tell you that we are students of online English. That is a very correct word to use there. It depends on the kind of sentence, how you want to construct a sentence. And it's very correct. And let us take a look onto this matter in Zimbabwe. Nelson Chamisa, I have seen an article which is comparing Nelson Chamisa to the Senegal president, to say Nelson Chamisa lost this election, but in Senegal, they did A, B, C, D, and they won the election. This is the argument which is there online, and it was brought to my attention. So we need to answer this because I have seen this raising a lot of debate in different WhatsApp groups. And I believe that once we have done with this issue, you will have clarity about what really transpired and if Nelson Chamisa for what happened during the elections. So one of the things which I've seen in this article is that there is a man who is a professor who is actually blaming Nelson Chamisa for everything. But that man is so wrong. If you take a look, number one, the laws of Senegal in terms of funding are different to the laws of Zimbabwe in terms of funding. In Senegal, you can acquire funding from outside. And in Zimbabwe, it's different. You need to make sure that you are funded by Zimbabweans, expressly Zimbabweans. And if there is a proof that you're not funded by Zimbabweans, you are in trouble. That is point number one. Nelson Chamisa had a disadvantage. While those from Senegal, the two young men, had no funding challenges. Number two, Nelson Chamisa was facing a junta here in Zimbabwe. In Senegal, they were not facing a junta. They were facing a president who had just become rogue, but he was actually disconnected from the military or from the junta itself. That is a very important difference there. If you take a look in Senegal, people went onto the streets to celebrate, to protest against Macky Sall's ways to prevent an election. They were never shot by the police. They were never shot by the military. They protested and protested freely without any problems and any challenges. This forced the president to reconsider. More importantly, in Senegal, they went to court to challenge the extension of the voting system to say, or of the voting day. The Constitutional Court of Senegal ruled in favor of the people and ruled against the junta. So if you take a look onto this whole issue along these key areas, number one, the issue of funding, number two, the issue of the military, number three, the issue of the courts or the institutions, the state institutions in Senegal, you would understand that Nelson Chamisa worked under very difficult conditions and very difficult circumstances. Did Nelson Chamisa lose the election? Nelson Chamisa never lost an election in Zimbabwe. In 2018, Nelson Chamisa didn't lose the election. In 2023, Nelson Chamisa didn't lose an election. In Senegal, there was no fuss. People voted. There was no fuss whatsoever. In Senegal, if you take a look, the majority of people living within Senegal, in terms of their population, the number of Senegalese people who are living within Senegal and abroad, there is a difference. There is a diaspora vote in Senegal. There was no diaspora vote in Zimbabwe. And also the majority of the citizens of Senegal are living within the borders of Senegal. Whilst in Zimbabwe, the majority of our people who are able to vote are no longer living in Zimbabwe. The majority of our people are illegally living in South Africa. They crossed the borders without passports. And this was never put into consideration by everybody who is making these arguments. Go to South Africa. In Pretoria and Joburg, this is a fact. Up to Cape Town, go to Botswana, they are there. Go to Mozambique. So you would actually see that Nelson Chamisa cannot take any lessons from the Senegal election. It can't happen in such a way. It won't work like that. It's because of the difference in terms of environment. One would come and argue the Senegal opposition leaders were arrested at a certain point in time. What happened when they were arrested? The people went into the streets on their own accord. They were never shot by live bullets. They went into the streets on their own accord. But in Zimbabwe, people are waiting for a signal. That is the very, very big difference. In Zimbabwe, elections were stolen. People waited for a signal. People waited for Nelson Chamisa to put everything in his own hands. And because Nelson Chamisa cannot sacrifice the people of Zimbabwe for the sake of power, he didn't give a command for the people to run into the streets because he knows for sure that people will be shot. They will be killed by soldiers. It happened in 2018. It happened in 2019. In 2019, people were protesting against fuel hikes. They were shot with live bullets without even thinking twice. There is a report which is there, a Mohlande Commission of Inquiry report. It has never been acted upon. The people who were involved in the shooting of citizens have never been held accountable, according to the Mohlande Commission report. It's a different case in Senegal. In the Senegal government, you will find that there are institutions which are functional. The judiciary there was functional. The there was functional. Those are two key institutions. And the majority of the citizens managed to vote because they were at home. So the youth of Senegal was rightly present in their country. I'm telling you this because if you take a look on the statistics of the youth who registered to vote and the statistics of the youth who actually voted, you can actually tell out of how many millions were registered to vote in Zimbabwe? How many? 6 million were registered to vote. But how many voted? Almost 2 million people didn't vote. 2 million people didn't vote in Zimbabwe. Just imagine. And you expect the opposition to win. The figures can be easily manipulated. That is a fact. Figures can be easily manipulated. Go to Zambia. Hakainde Hichilema had a margin of over 1 million. Is because the people from Zambia, they voted in their numbers. If our people had voted, if 1 million people who didn't vote had voted, you could have actually see Nelson Chamisa coming up with a very wide margin. But despite the fact that only few people voted, Nelson Chamisa managed to win this election, but it was manipulated. Things were not done transparently and were not done according to the standards we know. Go to 2018, Priscilla Jigumba, as the ZEC chairperson, announced elections in a different way. compared to 2023. In 2023, it was just like Mawina Mdara was over. We don't even know where these results came from. That is a fact. Josiah, thank you very much, Josiah, for coming. I doubt the credibility of the doctor who did that comparison. Personally, I agree with you, because that man seems to be isolated from the Zimbabwean situation. I understand these things because I was engaged left, right, and center in the 2023 elections. I participated in those elections. So you will see that Nelson Chamisa, under very difficult circumstances, very difficult conditions, managed to win the election, but what was announced? Something else. In a normal country, in a functional country, you could have not seen FAS run the election and the military would just let it like that. FAS acted outside the law. And as for the military, which is mandated to make sure that they defend the land, it was supposed to make sure that FAS was shut down. The military would have acted as the last resort to stop FAS. But they didn't. As illegal as it was allowed to operate and to roam in the villages and in the streets, terrorizing people, intimidating people, controlling people, force marching people and frog marching people to vote for ZANU-PF. It happened in the rural areas. It was happening. We were seeing it happening. But you'll be told that Nelson Chamisa, this Nelson Chamisa, that they will compare with somebody who didn't face FAS in his own country. And you'll be told, Nelson Chamisa kadai, Nelson Chamisa kadai. Honestly, Team Zimbabwe, ngatiedzei kutenda pane pabatwa basa. Nelson Chamisa did. Under very difficult circumstances, Nelson Chamisa did his best. When the two Senegalese candidates were jailed by President Macky Sall, we don't even hear about the reports of them being injected with something or the reports of them being given poison in the prisons. Fast forward to Zimbabwe. We have people who went to prison in Zimbabwe. We can talk of people like Patson Zamara. They were poisoned. Who poisoned them and where? We have Job Sikala, who is actually claiming right now to be seeking medical treatment elsewhere because he got sick when he was in prison and raised the alarm of alleged poisoning from prison. It's a different case if you go to Senegal. It's a different case. So if you are to compare these things, put together that comparison carefully, you would understand that this man is ill-informed and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Nelson Chamisa cannot be blamed for what happened in the 2023 elections. He did his best. He did all he could as a president, as a leader. He did all he could to make sure that we won that election. But what was he supposed to do with people like Washman Ngube? What was Nelson Chamisa supposed to do with Washman Ngube? Washman Ngube could have become the president of the vice president of Zimbabwe, but he took a position to sell out the election and was scheming and working with the ZANU-PF, and they had to bring in double candidates so as to make sure that ZANU-PF gets to the majority. But it failed to get to the majority. And they had to scheme further through Shavangu to recall the opposition MPs. Did that happen in Senegal? No, it didn't happen. In Senegal, the Electoral Commission of Senegal announced the correct results. In Zimbabwe, you are just told, Mawina say, Mdara, there is no explanation. If you ask, you can actually be handicapped. They will make sure that they leave you handicapped because you want to ask questions. Did Nelson Chamisa's agents sign the 2023 election results? No. Can you compare the results of the reports of observers from Senegal and the reports of observers from Zimbabwe, SADC, EU, AU, COMESA, all these observers, they said Zimbabwean elections didn't follow the procedures, didn't follow the constitutional provisions, didn't meet a standard to be called an election. And an old man who is calling himself a doctor, who believes that is educated, is actually missing all these issues. Before we make all these arguments, let us just place the report, SCOM report. Let us place the SADC, let us place the African Union up. Observer kanga aripo. Only one country. One country. Yega, ndo yakanga in a different report. Palestine is the only one which had a different report from any other. Because we know, yes, of course, we know. These boys are always to Palestine embassy. I don't remember organizations are they are lobbying for Palestine to be, you know. That is the only out of how many. So you would actually see that these people are misleading. If you just go onto the SCOM report, it tells you and the whole world that Nelson Chamisa performed to his maximum, and there was nothing he could have done to avoid what happened. As a human being, as a leader, Nelson Chamisa did all he could with the least resources. With the least resources in the history of elections in Zimbabwe, Nelson Chamisa won the election with the least resources. He had no cars for the party. Everything was taken by MDC. He had no cars for the party. Vanhu vake vaikambena vachiita zvokuvatanidza kumkwako, vanhu vachitumira mari from diaspora. Vanhu vachijoinidza kuti election ifambe, mama agents awane mari kuwanike chikafu. That is a different case from Senegal. And you have old men who never participated in the election, who never donated anything per election. Vachiuya vachiti Chamisa akatadza, Chamisa ndiye akadai, it's his fault. What? Wisdom, thank you very much, Zganza. When everything is settled, Mnangagwa and Gumba should apologize to the people of Zimbabwe about their rigging. Yes, if the truth is to be told, if the evidence is to be brought forward, if figures are to be brought forward, Makawina say election, Makawin, ZANU-PF cannot explain. They are actually criminals. Jennifer Zganza, yes, big time people trusted him, thinking he knew what he didn't know, thinking he was in touch with SADC. Now we are stuck. Citizens are supposed to be to demonstrate. Citizens can demonstrate, Jennifer, but the major question is who is going to demonstrate. You see, the issue is not about Nelson Chamisa. It's not Nelson Chamisa who should say people are them road. As citizens, what have you done? This is the major question. What have you done to make sure that you protest or you make your voices be heard? So sometimes we need to understand some things. It's not easy for Nelson Chamisa as a leader to simply make a decision like that. It's never easy because guns and bullets are there waiting for anybody who protests. So when we get into the streets, what is the agenda? Let us agree on that. The fact that the majority of our active people are outside Zimbabwe, that is a fact. The majority of our brave people, active people, are outside Zimbabwe. Majority of them being in South Africa. We need those people back home for us to be able to launch something formidable. You know, there was noise about protests Kumesina. That never materialized. That never materialized, which shows that our Zimbabweans are not united. To a certain extent, people are not united. And that is the major problem. How do we fix that? As Zimbabweans, we need to make sure that we have to agree. Take a look on how we speak. We speak on daily basis on these platforms, putting our lives at risk. But if you take a look on the numbers who come to even watch our videos, and the numbers of people who does have access to internet in Zimbabwe, it doesn't make sense, because my TT will have 30,000 people per live program, but I will have less than 200 people per live program. That should tell you how disconnected our people are when when important issues are happening. That alone should tell you the kind of people we are dealing with in Zimbabwe. A socialite who is doing Zinyadzi will attract more viewership than somebody who is talking about a better country. That is a fact. Ruben Zganza, please help us by giving us the real results. We want to criticize Chamisa without anyone knowing the true results. I believe that Nelson Chamisa got more votes than what we are being given by ZEC. I agree with you. And that is the fact. Nelson Chamisa got more than what he was given. Nelson Chamisa, do you know that in the past election, he had improved than in 2018? The number of registered voters had improved than in 2018. But you are shocked to know or to hear that he got lesser votes than in 2018. What changed? ZANU-PF never changed anything. In 2018, Mnangagwa had better standing than in 2023. In 2018, the rating of Mnangagwa was better than of 2023. And you tell us that Nelson Chamisa performed lesser than in 2018. Logic should guide people when making such arguments. In my own view, Nelson Chamisa did what he was supposed to do. But because we do not have institutions in Zimbabwe, but because we have a captured SADC, we have captured institutions in Zimbabwe, it has become a problem. When I talked to a lot of people right here in saying, I don't see elections coming. A lot of people criticized me. A lot of people came to my inbox, called me all sorts of names and said this and that and that and that and that. I was telling my own view to say, yes, as the citizens, we want fresh elections. The president is demanding fresh elections, but I don't see SADC pushing that further. When you see SADC pushing the issues of Nelson Chamisa, is because they are trying to cover up for something. Right now, they are pretending to be engaging Nelson Chamisa because they want to come to Zimbabwe and have their summit without any problems. So I see this as it's in the hands of the citizens of Zimbabwe to decide what they want to do when SADC comes to Zimbabwe. It's in the mind of the people of Zimbabwe. You cannot tell the people of Zimbabwe what to do right now. It's up to the people of Zimbabwe to decide. It's up to the people of Zimbabwe to agree on what to do. If people say, let us protest, people need to protest. But it must be an issue of agreeing. Are we going to protest and just leave the streets like that? Or we are going to protest and occupy the streets forever? If people are to use such kind of protests, then you have an advantage. For example, SADC leadership is going to be at that liberation center in Irkwaren Park. If people are serious, they can take that opportunity to go to the liberation center in their numbers and show their displeasure to SADC. But are we going to see our people go to the Liberation Center to make sure that they protest against SADC and how they have conducted everything? But what of what effect will it be? Because Mnangagwa got to a chairmanship to that. So it means the people of Zimbabwe need to be organized and need to start protesting. If they want to protest, they must make sure that they start protesting before SADC comes. Unity. The President Nelson Chamisa won the Zimbabwe election last year. I agree with you. Totally agree with you 100%. And if anybody from ZEC disputes this, they must come or allow audit to happen in their servers. And who prove that Nelson Chamisa won the election? There is proof that Nelson Chamisa won the election. If anybody thinks differently, they must go and prove it in court. But they can't, because these courts are captured. You see, that is the problem. So we have big people, big-headed people with very, very big titles, Dr. Chakadaro, Professor Chakadaro, but they are the people who fail to understand the basic things. And what is education? So we must make sure that we appreciate what other people did before we start to blame them. So you'd see Anzi Mnangagwa got 34% in 2023 elections. Okay. So you see that we are dealing with a gentleman's club, as Malema rightfully said. We are dealing with a gentleman's club. And yes, there are good people within SADC, good leaders within SADC who are actually doing the right thing. But we have a SADC secretariat, which is totally useless and totally captured. This time around with that Botswana Masisi there, they've compromised the SADC a lot. And with South Africa dancing around to the tune of Emmerson Mnangagwa, they've compromised the SADC. According to the processes, I think we came here and we talked about the procedures which SADC should follow. They never followed those procedures. And they are embracing Emmerson Mnangagwa as if he did things legitimately. They are actually celebrating a coup which happened in Zimbabwe. It's true. I'm Chamisa's supporter, but Pakasiasisi and Chadi politics. Akatirasisa, we were there to fight, but Pana Ziripo. Everest, it's your opinion. That is how you view things. But why not Chamisa Aite say? Was he supposed to be on a disadvantage page always, fighting for things you will never win in any court of law in Zimbabwe? What happened to Triple C MPs was illegal and remains illegal. If we are to have a justice system in Oshanda, all the people who were involved in that thing should rot in jail. They committed treason. That was the treasonous. I want to tell you this. If we are to put that matter to a functional court, they committed treason. What they did is treasonous. I can tell you this. But simply because we don't have a functional judiciary, all the people will continue to blame Nelson Chamisa. But is Nelson Chamisa folding his hands and saying, okay, election takabiri zakadaro? No. Nelson Chamisa has started engaging a better options than fighting in court, than protesting alone. He is actually fighting a bigger war than what people think. But the fact that he has chosen not to publicly disclose what he's doing, a lot of people would think Nelson Chamisa is doing nothing. So as a people, as Zimbabweans, we need to be very patient. We need to be united. We need to make sure that we are fighting with one voice. Let us fight with one voice and in one direction. And you will start to see things changing in the nation of Zimbabwe. So personally, I disagree with this article, the lessons for Nelson Chamisa from Senegalese elections. These are two different jurisdictions. The elections were done differently. You cannot compare them. I once gave a comparison with Julius Malema. You cannot compare the two. Zimbabwe is in its own league. Zimbabwe is in its own league. You have the elections, different results will be announced. You have an election, different results will be announced. That is the reason why Nelson Chamisa is disengaged from the issues of election and is now working on the issues of power, because he does have evidence that he won the elections and is now working to correct the mess which happened because of state capture in Zimbabwe. So it is what it is. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for your views. Let's wait for 2028. You can wait for 2028. There's no 2028. I can tell you this. There is no 2028 to talk about, because Emerson Mnangagwa is planning for 2030 and he has to be stopped before 2030 vision. So there is no 2020 to talk about, because Mnangagwa's plan is about 2030 and cheaper, which is something different and something out of touch with the majority of Zimbabweans. And we have a better plan. We are not going to 2028. We will not reach 2028. Whether we like it or not, there is no 2028 to talk about, because something is going to happen in between. Check the South African elections very carefully. South African elections are carrying a signal about something which is going to happen in Zimbabwe and in the SADC region as a whole. So if you go to Mozambique, in Mozambique they are doing things zvakarongeka, but in Zimbabwe, anongorima zvake mazvake. And you ask questions, what will happen next? The end of Emerson Mnangagwa is humiliation. But we pray that he finds himself in exile in time, because kana akasachenjera zviri kumberi uko zvichamukurira. Thank you very much for coming, Team Zimbabwe.